I grew up revering writers. This is largely because I came of age in the 70s when Francis Coppola and Mario Puzo were writing The Godfather, and Robert Towne was writing Chinatown, and Frank Pearson was writing Dog Day Afternoon, and Paddy Chayefsky was writing Network and The Hospital, and William Goldman was writing All the President's Men and Butch Cassidy. Throw in Rocky by Sylvester Stallone, and The Omen by David Seltzer, and The Candidate by Jeremy Larner, Kramer vs. Kramer by Robert Benton, Jaws by Peter Benchley, and Carl Gottlieb, and of course, Annie Hall in Manhattan by Woody Allen and Marshall Brickman. You've got the beginning of a Writers' Hall of Fame. These people were heroes to me. But I also grew up revering writers because my father represented them. He was a literary agent, a great one. And when I was 19, I walked into his office and announced that I decided I was going to be a screenwriter. He said, "Come with me." Back in those days, literary agencies kept their clients' scripts on paper. And in the back of my father's office, there was a large storeroom with these huge metal shelves that were stacked high with scripts. On one of those shelves were the scripts of his client, Alvin Sargent, who had written Julia and Paper Moon. My father pulled down Alvin's brilliant shooting screenplay for Ordinary People, and he handed it to me. He said, "Here, do this." And that's where he was setting the bar for me, and I've been trying to hit it ever since. Because WGA rules require that any successful screenwriter starts out struggling so that he'll have a story to tell later. I spent the first 3 years out of school, as Gail mentioned, doing a regular job by day and writing at night. But shortly after I had worked for Gail, I caught a little bit of fire and became a bit of the flavor of the month, and pretty soon I found myself writing 2 movies for a big-time producer at Universal, and I was getting treated beautifully. One day I walked into his office for a meeting, and there was a piece of paper spitting out of his dot matrix printer. For those of you not familiar with the technology, this was the late 80s. On this page was a list, and at the top of the list were 2 letters, AA, and beside it was the name of his wife and his lawyer. And I realized I was looking at his Christmas list. And a voice in me said, "Billy, stop reading, because you don't want to know where you are on this list. You don't want to know what letter you are." But several weeks later, a Christmas gift arrived from this producer's office, and it was this beautiful silver tray with a gingerbread house on it that was inlaid with candies and lights. It was fantastic. And I thought to myself, well, I'm not AA, but I'm A, and I'm only 25. That's pretty good. During the course of the next year, both movies that I was writing for him went into turnaround. And as Christmas time rolled around, I found myself thinking, I don't think there's another silver tray coming for me this year. But soon a messenger from his office came and presented me with this great gift basket. And inside the gift basket was a bottle of wine and salami and some cheese. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm not A, but I'm still B, and I'm only 26. That's not so bad. An hour later, I got a call from a panicked assistant who worked for this producer. He said, "Did you get a gift from us?" I said, "Yes, I did." He said, "Don't open it." I said, "Why not?" He said, "We got your gift mixed up with somebody else." I said, "Well, it's okay. I mean, he got mine, I got his. It's really fine." And I said, "Don't open it. Someone's coming over right now." He hung up, still palpitating, and 10 minutes later, I hear a screech of tires outside my apartment and the frantic steps of this panicked assistant as he pounds his way up the stairs to my door where he pounded, and I answered. And there he is, ashen-faced. He says, "Do you have it?" And I give him the gift basket. And he handed me a tin of yogurt-covered pretzels. When people ask me what it's like to be a young screenwriter in Hollywood, that's the story that I tell them. In other words, Nichols Fellows, I am now officially welcoming you into the fraternity of screenwriters, which means it's my job both to congratulate you and to warn you about what's out there. 10 years ago, or even 5, this warning would have been simple. Back then, when screenwriters got together to bitch, which was often, it was usually about directors for being bullies, or for trying to steal a shared screenplay by credit, or cutting necessary dialogue, or just plain botching things. But that's not the case anymore. The sands under all of us have shifted now. And today, directors, even the arrogant ones, are running scared like everybody else. Today, the warning is actually about the business itself and the almost pathological timidity of the institutions that control it. When I started writing, there were still a few mavericks out there, a few gunslingers who were running studios. These were people who went with their guts and would make a movie just because they believed in it. But that's not the process anymore. Today, before a studio chair can greenlight a movie, that movie must also be blessed by the head of marketing and the head of foreign sales and the head of home video. It must be subjected to a process called running the numbers, which means that that movie's cost or downside is compared against its potential value because of its cast and because of what it might do in foreign markets. Of course, this process takes into account every variable, except the variable which actually matters, the one that can't possibly be gauged by any sort of calculus, which is whether or not the movie is going to be any good. And yet, the process continues. There are other challenges too. One's born of progress itself. It's axiomatic now that the technology of movie making has never been greater than it is today. But I don't think any of us can honestly say that the movies themselves have never been greater. And these things are not unrelated. Suppose that we were going to shoot a scene of this very ceremony in this very room. We can now, if we want to, add elements to that scene to make it more visually arresting. We could light the ceiling on fire by using CGI. We could enhance the experience by projecting it in 3D. Does any of this have anything to do with story or character? No, but it would look great in a trailer. That kind of thinking, the idea that dazzling visuals are enough, has led to a certain kind of movie-making laziness that has not been good for anybody. Worse, it's made it tougher and tougher to dazzle the audience because they know out there now that we're making movies with software instead of cameras. And when any image is possible, no image is all that impressive anymore. We're storytellers, which means we have to do better. Sometimes I think we have to rescue the business from the very people who own it. The good news is we can. Inside every one of you, Nicholl's Fellows, is the flame that has always lit the way in this industry, which is originality. That one spark of an idea, that one archetypal character or story or truth or world that no one's ever captured before. Do you remember the movie WALL-E, the brilliant Pixar film? He's in a dangerous world, and he's one of thousands who are supposed to clean it up, but there's something special about WALL-E. He finds this little tiny sprig, which might one day become a plant, and he guards it and saves it and preserves it on the chance that it might someday turn into something beautiful. Well, Hollywood is that dangerous world, and you are WALL-E, and your idea is that plant, and you have to protect it. If you do, it might change the world. That's your charge now. Greatness. You have to pursue it every single day in everything that you do. In your work ethic, in the way that you conduct yourself, in who you choose to do business with, and whether or not you learn from them. You are now a part of the most collaborative medium anywhere in the world, and much of your success in it is going to be determined by how well you listen. I was very fortunate in that regard. As the child of divorced parents, I learned early how to take two warring factions and make them both feel that they'd been heard. This works fantastic in meetings. You're going to get a lot of notes in your career, and it will be your instinct to resent them. But I'm telling you now to ignore this instinct. The fact is that most of the notes that you get will be smart and thoughtful, and all of them, even the bad ones, will teach you something about where you failed to articulate something as clearly as you had it in your head, or where something just didn't make it on the page, where something just didn't land. You will make your living largely not by writing, but by rewriting. And the grace and efficiency with which you do that will define you. But what will mostly define you more than anything else is what projects you say yes to and what projects you say no to. Here's a rule of thumb about that. If someone offers you a job on a project that has real heat, a star attached to it, or some wonderful pedigree, and you find that you're not waking up every morning thinking about it, if it's not living inside of you, trying to claw its way out, then don't write it. Remember that you got here by believing in original thinking. Never forget that. And always remember that if you are inspired, we will be too. The best advice I ever heard about writing came from Paddy Chayefsky, he of the aforementioned Network and The Hospital. He also wrote Marty. That's 3 Oscars. Chayefsky's advice to writers was simple. Don't think of it as art. Think of it as work. Because when a writer is stuck and he or she calls in another writer for help, that second writer doesn't say, what's the art problem? That second writer says, what's not working? And they get under the hood and they fix it together. That's most of what you'll do in your career, work, problem solving. Approach it in that way. And then at the end of every day, you'll at least be able to say, I did my job today. And if you're an artist, it'll come out as art anyway. The truth is, there are millions of variables that will profoundly affect your career, variables over which you have zero control. You have no control over the state of the economy or over the health of our industry. You have no say in whether or not the DVD business flatlines or whether or not the market is suddenly ripe for thrillers or superhero movies or, God help us, romantic comedies. The only variable you will ever have any control over is your willingness to work hard. So maximize that variable. I take my son to his bus stop every morning at 7:30. I'm at my desk working by 8. Somebody feeds me at 1, and I'm back at my desk by 1:30, working until 6. I don't surf the web. I don't gamble online. I don't go to the local Starbucks for 2 hours. I don't try to seek out old girlfriends on Facebook. I don't do anything that requires time. I just work. I do this because there's a mountaintop that I'm trying to get to, and I'm nowhere near it. I can see it from here, but the accomplishments of those writers that I mentioned earlier, that's the holy grail for me. I want to leave a legacy like they did. I want to spend a lot of time in tuxedos. The next time that the AFI does a list of the 100 greatest movies of all time, I want my name on one of them, at least. And I want someday in 2032 for someone standing right here making this speech to cite one of my movies with the same kind of reverence that I have for those movies of the 70s. Luck will not get me there, although I will need plenty of it. The only thing that will get me there is my willingness to write that 15th draft, or proofread it one more time, or be open to notes from someone who's smarter than I am. It may be that I'll be getting notes from one of you Nichols fellows one day, and I trust that they'll be good ones. I'll leave you with one last thought. As you surge forward, don't forget to look back. At the Writers Guild building on 3rd and Fairfax, there's a library. And in that library, you can read any screenplay that you'd ever want to read. Visit that library. It's your history up on those shelves, the bar that was set for you by the writers that have preceded you. Their triumphs, their struggles, they belong to you now. Cherish them, learn from them, let them challenge you to keep getting better. It's true, there will be a tin of yogurt-covered pretzels or 2 thrown your way. But if you keep trying and if you keep fighting, it might one day be replaced on your shelf by an Oscar. I wish you nothing but the best, and I thank you very much.